I thought I was being supportive when I emptied my savings account to pay for his final semester, but apparently I was just being naive and stupid. So here I am, 26 years old, sitting in my tiny apartment with absolutely nothing to show for 3 years of what I thought was love, except for a maxed-out credit card, and a text message that basically destroyed my entire worldview about relationships and trust. Let me start from the beginning because honestly, I need to get this all out before I completely lose my mind over this whole situation. We met during my junior year of college when I was working part-time at this little coffee shop near campus. He was this charming, ambitious guy who always ordered the same complicated drink and would stay for hours working on his laptop. We started talking, and I was immediately drawn to his passion for his studies and his big dreams about changing the world after graduation. The relationship developed slowly at first. Coffee dates turned into study sessions, which turned into weekend adventures exploring the city together. He was incredibly smart and driven, always talking about his future plans and how he wanted to make a real difference in his field. I admired that about him so much because I had always been more of a go-with-the-flow type of person, never really having concrete long-term goals like he did. After we both graduated, we moved in together to this small apartment about 20 minutes from downtown. I had landed a decent entry-level position that paid okay, while he decided to go back to school for his graduate degree. This meant he would be studying full-time and could only work very part-time hours, so financially things were going to be tight for both of us. But I was completely supportive of his decision, because I believed in his dreams and wanted to see him succeed. We talked extensively about how we would manage the financial strain, and he promised that once he finished his program and got established in his career, he would take care of me the same way I was taking care of him during his studies. The first year was actually pretty wonderful despite the money being tight. We learned how to cook cheap but delicious meals together, had movie nights at home instead of going out to expensive restaurants, and found free activities around the city like hiking trails and art museum free days. It felt like we were building something real together, like we were a team working toward a shared future. He was incredibly grateful for everything I was doing to support him financially and emotionally. He would often tell me how lucky he felt to have someone who believed in him so completely, and how he couldn't wait to return the favor once he was earning a good income. These conversations made me feel so confident about our relationship and our future together. But somewhere during his second year of graduate school, things started to shift in ways that were subtle at first but became more obvious as time went on. He began spending more and more time at school, claiming he had to work on group projects or meet with professors for research discussions. When he was home, he seemed distracted and would often be on his phone or laptop instead of spending quality time with me. I tried to be understanding because I knew graduate school was demanding and stressful, but I started feeling lonely and disconnected from him. When I would try to talk to him about how I was feeling, he would get defensive and say that I was being needy and not understanding the pressure he was under with his studies. Meanwhile, I was working longer hours at my job to cover more of our living expenses since his part-time work wasn't bringing in much money. I was exhausted most of the time, but I kept telling myself that this was temporary and that things would get better once he graduated and started his career. During his final semester, he came to me in a panic because he was short on money for tuition and fees. His financial aid hadn't come through as expected, and he was facing the possibility of not being able to complete his degree program. He was absolutely devastated and kept saying how all of his hard work would be for nothing if he couldn't finish this last semester. Seeing him so upset broke my heart completely. I had been saving money for the past few years, planning to eventually use it for a down payment on a house or maybe to go back to school myself at some point. But in that moment, seeing the person I loved in such distress, I didn't hesitate to offer him the money he needed. The amount was significant, basically my entire savings account plus some additional money I had to put on my credit card. But I told myself that this was an investment in our future together, and that once he graduated and got a good job, we would be able to rebuild our savings and plan for the next steps in our relationship. He was incredibly emotional and grateful when I gave him the money. He kept saying how he would never forget what I had done for him, and how he was going to spend the rest of his life making it up to me. He promised that as soon as he graduated and got established in his career, he would pay me back and we would start planning our wedding and our future together. Those promises meant everything to me because they confirmed that we were truly partners in this relationship, supporting each other through difficult times and working together toward shared goals. I felt so proud of myself for being able to help him achieve his dreams, and I was excited about the future we were going to build together. The final few months of his program were incredibly busy for him, but I was happy because I knew he was working hard to finish strong and set himself up for career success. He was often gone from early morning until late at night, but he would text me throughout the day to let me know how things were going and to thank me again for making his education possible. Graduation day was absolutely magical. I was so proud watching him walk across that stage, knowing that I had played a crucial role in helping him achieve this milestone. His family was there, and they were incredibly grateful to me for supporting him through school. I felt like I was truly part of the family, and that we were celebrating not just his achievement but our achievement as a couple. Update 1. After graduation, he started applying for positions in his field, while also working some temporary jobs to bring in income while he searched for the right opportunity. I was completely supportive of him taking his time to find something that would be a good fit for his career goals rather than just taking the first offer that came along. But something felt different about our relationship during this time. He seemed distant and preoccupied, and when I would ask him about it, he would say he was just stressed about the job search and worried about finding the right position. I tried to be patient and understanding, but I was starting to feel like we were roommates rather than partners planning a future together. A few weeks after graduation, he told me he had been offered a position in another state. It was apparently an amazing opportunity with great pay and excellent benefits, exactly the kind of job he had been hoping to find. But when I asked about the logistics of moving together and finding a job for myself in the new city, he became vague and evasive. He said he needed to focus on getting established in the new position first, and that maybe I could join him later once he was settled. This didn't sit right with me at all because we had always talked about making major life decisions together, and suddenly he was making plans that affected both of us without really including me in the decision-making process. When I expressed my concerns about this approach, he became defensive and accused me of being unsupportive of his career goals. He said that I was being selfish for not wanting him to take advantage of this incredible opportunity, and that I should be happy for him instead of making demands about our relationship. This conversation left me feeling confused and hurt, because I wasn't trying to prevent him from taking the job. I just wanted to understand how we were going to navigate this change together as a couple. But he made it seem like I was being unreasonable for expecting to be included in discussions about our future. Over the next few days, he became even more distant and would often leave the apartment without telling me where he was going or when he would be back. When I would ask about his plans, he would get irritated and say that he needed space to think about his future without feeling pressured by me. I started to panic because it felt like our relationship was falling apart, but I didn't understand why, or what I had done wrong. I kept replaying our conversations in my head, wondering if I had been too pushy about the moving situation, or if I had somehow failed to show proper support for his career opportunity. One evening I decided to have a calm, honest conversation with him about what was happening in our relationship. I waited until he got home from whatever he had been doing that day, and I asked if we could sit down and talk about where things stood between us. But instead of engaging in the conversation, he became immediately defensive and said that I was being clingy and needy, and that he couldn't handle the pressure I was putting on him during this stressful time in his life. He said that maybe we needed to take a break from the relationship so he could focus on his career transition. I was absolutely devastated by this suggestion because taking a break felt like the beginning of the end, especially given how distant he had been acting. But I also didn't want to be the kind of person who prevented someone from pursuing their dreams, so I reluctantly agreed to give him the space he said he needed. We decided that he would stay with a friend for a few weeks while he prepared for the move to his new job, and that we would use this time apart to think about what we wanted from our relationship and our future together. Even though this arrangement broke my heart, I hoped that the time apart would help him realize how much our relationship meant to him. Update 2. The weeks he spent at his friend's place were some of the most difficult of my entire life. I spent most of my time wondering what he was thinking and feeling, and whether he was missing me the way I was missing him. I kept hoping he would reach out to suggest meeting up to talk, but our communication became limited to practical text messages about his belongings and mail. During this time I started to reflect on our entire relationship, and all the ways I had supported him over the years. I began to wonder if I had lost myself somewhere along the way, always prioritizing his needs and dreams over my own goals and aspirations. But I also kept telling myself that this was just a rough patch, and that once he got settled in his new job, we would be able to work things out. About 3 weeks into our break, I received a text message from him asking if he could come by the apartment to pick up the rest of his belongings. My heart jumped because I thought this might be an opportunity for us to have a real conversation about our relationship and figure out how to move forward together. But when he arrived, he was cold and businesslike, focusing only on packing his things efficiently rather than engaging with me emotionally. I tried to start a conversation about our relationship, but he kept redirecting the discussion back to practical matters like forwarding his mail and splitting up shared accounts. As he was getting ready to leave with his boxes, I finally worked up the courage to ask him directly about the future of our relationship. I told him that I loved him, and that I believed we could work through whatever challenges we were facing if we were willing to communicate openly and make compromises together. His response completely caught me off guard. He said that he had been doing a lot of thinking during our time apart, and that he had realized we wanted different things from life. He claimed that I was too focused on traditional relationship milestones like marriage and settling down, while he wanted to focus on building his career and exploring new opportunities. This characterization of me felt completely unfair because I had always been supportive of his ambitions and had never pressured him about marriage or other relationship milestones. In fact, I had sacrificed my own financial security and goals to help him achieve his dreams, which seemed like the opposite of someone who was focused on traditional expectations. But before I could respond to his accusations, he said that he thought it would be best if we ended our relationship permanently rather than trying to maintain something long distance while he got established in his new city. He said that he didn't want to hold me back from finding someone who was ready for the kind of relationship I wanted. I was absolutely stunned by this conversation because it felt like he was rewriting the history of our entire relationship. He was portraying himself as someone who had been clear about not wanting commitment, when in reality he had been the one making promises about our future together and talking about marriage and shared goals. After he left that day, I spent hours crying and trying to make sense of what had just happened. I felt like I didn't even recognize the person who had just broken up with me, because he seemed so different from the man I had fallen in love with and supported for years. But the worst part was still to come. 2 days after our breakup conversation, I received a text message from him that absolutely shattered whatever remained of my heart and my faith in people. The message started with him saying that he wanted to be completely honest with me about something, and that he hoped I would understand his perspective. He went on to explain that during his final semester of school, he had developed feelings for someone else, a classmate who shared his academic interests and career ambitions. He claimed that he had tried to fight these feelings because he didn't want to hurt me, but that spending so much time working on projects with this person had made him realize that they were more compatible than we were. He said that this other person understood his professional goals in a way that I never could, and that they shared an intellectual connection that he had been missing in our relationship. The text message continued with him explaining that he had been planning to end our relationship for months, but that he hadn't known how to bring it up because he felt guilty about the money I had given him for school. He said that he had been hoping to find a way to pay me back before ending things, but that he realized he couldn't stay in a relationship he no longer wanted just because of financial obligations. But then came the part that absolutely destroyed me. He said that he had already moved in with this other person in their new city, and that they were planning to build a life together. He claimed that he had never intended for things to happen this way, but that sometimes life takes unexpected turns and you have to follow your heart. He ended the message by saying that he hoped someday I would understand that he was doing what was best for both of us, and that he wished me happiness in finding someone who was ready for the kind of relationship I wanted. He also mentioned that he would pay me back for the school money eventually, but that it might take some time since he was just starting his new job. Final update. Reading that text message felt like having my entire world collapse around me. I had to read it multiple times because I couldn't believe that someone I had loved and trusted so completely could be capable of such calculated deception and cruelty. The realization that he had been planning to leave me for months while still accepting my financial support and emotional investment made me feel incredibly stupid and naive. I kept thinking about all the times he had thanked me for believing in him and supporting his dreams, knowing now that he was already planning to share those dreams with someone else. But what hurt even more than the betrayal was the way he had characterized our entire relationship in that message. He made it sound like we had been incompatible from the beginning, when in reality we had spent years building what I thought was a strong partnership, based on mutual support and shared goals. The worst part was realizing that while I had been emptying my savings account and putting myself in debt to support his education, he had been developing an emotional and probably physical relationship with someone else. I felt like such a fool for not seeing the signs, for believing his explanations about being busy with school, for trusting him completely when he was lying to my face every single day. I spent the next several weeks in a state of complete emotional devastation. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't focus on anything except replaying our entire relationship in my head and trying to figure out when everything had started to go wrong. I kept wondering if there had been red flags I had missed, or if I had somehow driven him away by being too supportive or too trusting. My friends and family were incredibly angry on my behalf when I told them what had happened. They kept saying that he was a terrible person for taking advantage of me financially and emotionally, and that I deserved so much better than someone who could treat me so cruelly. But their anger, while well-intentioned, didn't make me feel any better about the situation. The financial aspect of the betrayal was almost as devastating as the emotional aspect. I had to move to a smaller, cheaper apartment because I could no longer afford the rent on our old place without his contribution. I was also dealing with credit card debt from the money I had lent him for school, which meant I was paying interest on money that had basically funded his new life with someone else. But perhaps the most difficult part of the whole experience was losing faith in my own judgment about people and relationships. I had been so confident that I knew him well, that our relationship was strong, that he was someone I could trust with my heart and my future. Discovering that I had been so completely wrong about all of that made me question everything I thought I knew about love and partnership. About 2 months after the breakup, I found out through mutual friends that he had gotten engaged to the person he had left me for. This news hit me like a physical blow because it confirmed that everything he had said about not being ready for commitment had been a lie. He wasn't afraid of commitment, he just didn't want to commit to me. Learning about his engagement also made me realize that his relationship with this other person had been much more serious and long-term than he had admitted in his text message. You don't get engaged to someone after a few months of casual dating, which meant he had probably been planning his future with this person for a long time while still accepting my support and making promises about our future together. Around this same time, I received another text message from him, this one much shorter than the previous one. He said that he had been thinking about me and hoping that I was doing well. He mentioned that he was getting settled in his new life and that he was happy, and he hoped that I was finding happiness too. The message felt like salt in an open wound because it was so casual and disconnected from the reality of what he had put me through. He was apparently living his dream life with his new partner while I was struggling to rebuild my finances, my living situation, and my entire sense of self after his betrayal. But that message also sparked something in me that I hadn't felt since the breakup, a kind of anger that was different from the devastation and self-doubt I had been experiencing. I realized that I was tired of feeling like a victim of his choices, and that I needed to start focusing on rebuilding my own life, rather than mourning the future I had thought we would have together. I started by setting small, achievable goals for myself. I found a second part-time job to help pay off the credit card debt more quickly. I started cooking healthy meals for myself and going for long walks to clear my head. I reconnected with friends I had neglected during the years I was so focused on supporting his dreams. Slowly, I began to remember who I was before I became so wrapped up in being his supportive partner. I started thinking about my own goals and dreams, many of which I had put on hold while I was focused on helping him achieve his. I realized that I had been so busy being supportive that I had forgotten to advocate for myself and my own aspirations. 6 months after the breakup, I made the decision to go back to school myself. I had always been interested in a particular field but had never pursued it seriously because I was so focused on supporting his education and career. Using some of the money from my second job, I enrolled in a certification program that would allow me to transition into work that was more meaningful to me. The process of learning new skills and working toward my own goals was incredibly healing. For the first time in years, I was investing in myself rather than investing in someone else's dreams. I discovered that I was actually quite capable and intelligent when I focused my energy on my own development rather than on supporting someone else. As I started to rebuild my confidence and sense of self, I also began to see the breakup differently. Instead of viewing it as evidence of my failure as a partner, I started to see it as evidence of his character flaws and his inability to treat people with honesty and respect. I realized that his behavior said nothing about my worth as a person and everything about his lack of integrity. About a year after the breakup, I ran into one of his old classmates at a coffee shop. During our conversation, she mentioned that several people in their graduate program had been aware of his relationship with the person he eventually left me for, and that it had been going on for much longer than he had admitted to me. This information, while painful to hear, actually helped me feel more resolved about the situation. It confirmed that I hadn't been imagining things when I felt like something was off in our relationship during his final semester. It also made me realize that his betrayal had been even more calculated and deliberate than I had originally understood. But instead of feeling devastated by this revelation, I felt a strange sense of relief. It meant that the problems in our relationship hadn't been caused by my inadequacy or failure as a partner, but by his decision to pursue someone else while still accepting my support and commitment. By this time, I had paid off most of the credit card debt and was well into my certification program. I had also started dating someone new, someone who was honest and straightforward in their communication, and who seemed genuinely interested in building something real together. This new relationship was completely different from my previous one. Instead of me being the primary supporter and caregiver, we both contributed equally to the partnership. Instead of making all the sacrifices, we both made compromises and adjustments to accommodate each other's goals and needs. The contrast between these two relationships made me realize how unbalanced and unhealthy my previous relationship had been, even before the betrayal. I had been so focused on being the perfect supportive partner that I had lost sight of whether my own needs were being met, or whether I was being treated with the respect and consideration I deserved. 2 years after the breakup, I received an unexpected message from him. He said that he had been thinking about our relationship, and that he wanted to apologize for the way he had handled things. He claimed that he had been young and confused, and that he realized now that he had hurt me unnecessarily. The message went on to say that he was sorry for not being more honest with me about his feelings, and for accepting my financial support when he was already planning to end our relationship. He said that he hoped I could forgive him someday, and that he wished things could have ended differently between us. Reading this apology, I felt surprisingly little emotion. The person who had sent this message felt like a stranger to me, someone from a completely different chapter of my life that I had already processed and moved beyond. I realized that I no longer needed his apology or his acknowledgement of wrongdoing to feel complete or resolved about our relationship. I never responded to his message because I didn't see any point in reopening communication with someone who had demonstrated such a fundamental lack of integrity and respect. Instead, I shared the message with my current partner, who listened supportively, and then helped me delete it without giving it another thought. Now, 3 years later, I can honestly say that his betrayal was one of the most painful, but ultimately transformative experiences of my life. It forced me to examine my own patterns in relationships, to set better boundaries, and to prioritize my own goals and dreams instead of always putting someone else's needs first. I completed my certification program and transitioned into work that I find much more fulfilling and meaningful. I learned to manage my finances more carefully, and to never again put myself in a position where I could be taken advantage of financially by someone I trusted. Most importantly, I learned to trust my own instincts and to speak up when something doesn't feel right in a relationship, rather than making excuses for someone else's behavior or convincing myself that I'm being too sensitive or demanding. The experience taught me that real love involves mutual respect, honest communication, and shared sacrifice. It's not about one person constantly giving while the other person constantly takes. It's about two people who are equally committed to supporting each other's growth and happiness. Looking back now, I can see that he actually did me a favor by showing me his true character before I made even bigger commitments to him like marriage or buying a house together. As painful as it was at the time, his betrayal saved me from wasting even more years of my life with someone who was fundamentally selfish and dishonest. I never did get repaid for the money I gave him for school, and I don't expect that I ever will. But I've come to see that money as the cost of an extremely valuable education about relationships, boundaries, and self-respect. In many ways, it was worth every penny for the lessons it taught me about what I will and won't accept in future relationships. Today, I'm in a committed relationship with someone who treats me as an equal partner, who communicates honestly even when conversations are difficult, and who would never dream of taking advantage of my generosity or trust. We're building something together based on mutual respect and shared goals, and I finally understand what a healthy relationship actually looks like. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if he had been honest with me from the beginning about his changing feelings, or if he had refused my financial support once he realized he was planning to end our relationship. But I've learned not to spend too much time on these hypothetical scenarios because they don't change what actually happened or who he chose to be in that situation. The most important thing I learned from this experience is that I deserve to be with someone who chooses me consistently, not someone who stays with me out of guilt or obligation, while secretly planning their future with someone else. I deserve honesty, respect, and genuine commitment, and I will never again settle for less than that in any relationship. His text message that day broke my heart, but it also set me free to find the kind of love and partnership I actually deserve. For that, I suppose I should be grateful, even though it took me a long time to see it that way.